Hey everybody, welcome back. We're diving deep today into something I think a lot of people have thought about at one point or another in their lives, God's plan. We're going to be looking at a piece called What They Never Told You About God's Plan for Your Life.
Oh, yeah.
It's a pretty big promise, right?
It is.
I mean, who wouldn't want to know the secrets to unlocking their destiny or whatever?
Right. It definitely has that motivational self-help kind of vibe.
It does. But it's also grounded in faith and scripture, which is what makes it so interesting.
Absolutely. This kind of message really resonates with people who are looking for direction or maybe go through tough times. You know, they're seeking that sense of hope and purpose.
Yeah, and even for someone like me who's a little bit skeptical, I found myself getting drawn in by this whole idea that there's this hidden part of God's plan that's just waiting to be revealed.
It's a powerful concept for sure. This idea that there's something more, a deeper truth that most people miss.
Right, and if you can just tap into that secret knowledge, then you'll unlock your true potential.
Exactly. And that's where this piece really hooks you in. It starts with Jeremiah 29:11.
Oh yeah, the famous "for I know the plans I have for you" verse.
That's the one. You know, it's all about hope and a future.
But the source claims that most people miss the real power of that verse because they skip over verse 13.
Which talks about seeking God with all your heart.
Right, so it's not enough to just know the verse you have to actively seek God's plan.
That's the key, and it's a theme that runs throughout this piece. This idea that you have to put in the effort to unlock your destiny.
What are your thoughts on that from a theological standpoint?
Well, it's interesting because Jeremiah 29 is often interpreted within the context of exile and restoration.
Meaning?
It was a message of comfort to the Israelites during a time of hardship, you know, assuring them that God hadn't abandoned them.
So it's less about finding the perfect career path and more about holding on to hope when things are tough.
Exactly. It's about trusting that God is with you even when you can't see the way forward.
But the source takes it a step further, right? They talk about setbacks as setups.
Oh, yeah. That's where they bring in the Joseph story.
The one where he gets sold into slavery by his own brothers, but then ends up ruling Egypt.
It's a pretty dramatic example.
It is. It's like the ultimate comeback story.
Right. And it's used to illustrate this idea that even the worst experiences can be part of God's plan.
That they're not really setbacks, but setups for something greater.
Exactly. It's all about trusting the process, even when it's painful or confusing.
But doesn't that kind of thinking let people off the hook for their own bad choices?
And it's something we need to be careful about. The source is definitely emphasizing a particular interpretation of Joseph's story.
To fit their message.
Right. The idea of setbacks as setups can be empowering, but it's important not to oversimplify it.
Or use it as an excuse to avoid taking responsibility for our actions.
Exactly. There's a balance to be struck between trusting in a higher power and acknowledging our own agency.
Yeah, it's not about saying, well, it's all part of God's plan, so I have to do it.
Right? It's more about recognizing that even difficult experiences can teach us something valuable.
And maybe even lead us in a direction we wouldn't have chosen for ourselves.
Exactly. It's about finding meaning and purpose in the midst of challenge.
Okay, so we've got this tension between free will and destiny, personal responsibility and divine guidance.
It's a complex issue for sure, and one that we'll continue to explore as we dive deeper into the source's 3 keys for unlocking God's plan.
Okay, so let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and unpack those 3 keys.
All right, sounds good.
See you on it, dude.
Yeah, it's like they took these ancient stories and teachings, you know, and then they mixed them with like modern day motivational stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool blend.
It is. It's super effective though.
It is. Like when it talks about God's plan being bigger than your past mistakes, bigger than your current circumstances, and like even bigger than your wildest dreams. I mean, come on, who wouldn't want to believe that?
It's a very appealing message for sure.
But could it also be a little dangerous?
How so?
Well, if you start believing that everything is already preordained, couldn't that lead to a lack of personal responsibility?
Ah, I see what you mean.
Like if it's all part of God's plan, then why bother trying to change anything, right?
That's a valid point. It's important to remember that we still have free will. We make choices, and those choices have consequences.
So it's not about just sitting back and waiting for God to reveal the plan.
Not exactly. It's more about finding that balance between trusting in a higher power and taking responsibility for your own actions.
Okay, so let's get into the 3 keys the source gives us for unlocking God's plan. The first one is trust the process.
Ah, yes. Trust the process.
And they back it up with Proverbs 3:5 to 6 about trusting in the Lord and not leaning on your own understanding. What does that look like in practice?
Well, I think it means different things to different people. But essentially, it's about letting go of control.
Surrender.
Yeah, having faith that even when things don't make sense, there's a bigger picture unfolding.
So no more micromanaging every detail of your life.
Exactly. It's about cultivating trust and allowing yourself to be guided by something beyond your limited human perspective.
Interesting. You know, this reminds me of all the research on mindfulness and acceptance.
Oh yeah, totally.
Like how practicing mindfulness can actually reduce stress and anxiety.
That's right. When we can let go of the need to control everything and just accept what is itself, we open ourselves up to new possibilities.
And a greater sense of peace.
Exactly. It's like the spiritual and the scientific are meeting in the middle on this one.
They're converging.
They are.
Okay, what's the next key?
Embrace the waiting season.
They use a verse from Isaiah 40.31 about those who wait on the Lord renewing their strength.
Yeah, it's all about patience.
Which, let's be honest, is not always easy.
It's not, but it's so important.
So instead of getting frustrated by delays or setbacks, we should try to see them as opportunities for growth.
Exactly. It's a shift in perspective. From why is this taking so long to what can I learn during this time?
I like that. It's about making the most of those waiting periods.
That's right. And there's that great quote by Rilke.
Oh, yeah.
Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final.
Wow. That's powerful.
It is. It reminds us that even the tough times are just a temporary part of the journey.
Okay, last key. Taking bold steps of faith.
This one's all about action.
They quote James 2.26, faith without works is dead.
Yeah, so it's not enough to just believe, you have to actually do something.
Put your faith into action.
Exactly. It's about moving beyond passive belief and taking those steps, even if they feel scary or uncertain.
So it's about finding that balance again.
Yes, between faith and action, surrender and agency.
Thinking about all this, I've definitely had those moments where I felt stuck.
Like you were just waiting for something to happen?
Yeah, but maybe those waiting periods were actually opportunities for me to reflect and get clear on what I really wanted.
That's a great way to look at it.
And then when you finally did take action,
It felt like everything just clicked into place.
it's amazing how that works, right? It is. This deep dive is already changing how I think about my own journey. It makes you wonder,
Yeah.
have I missed any setups that were disguised as challenges?
Good question to ask yourself.
It is. And you know what else I'm curious about?
What's that?
The source really focuses on one specific interpretation of the Joseph story.
Right.
Are there other ways to interpret it?
Absolutely. The beauty of biblical texts is that they can be interpreted in so many ways.
So it's not just about finding the one right answer.
Not at all. It's about exploring different perspectives and being open to new insights.
And being aware of our own biases.
Exactly. We all come to these stories with our own preconceived notions, and it's important to acknowledge that.
Okay, I think this is a good place to take another pause.
Yeah. Let's let all of this sink in for a minute.
We've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about how we need to be active in our lives, make choices and stuff, even if we believe in God's plan.
Right, like we're not just puppets on a string.
Exactly. Our choices matter.
You mentioned earlier that there's something really important for our listeners to take away from this whole discussion about God's plan setbacks and thinking critically. What is it?
I think the biggest thing is to remember that just because you believe in a preordained plan, it doesn't mean you should just, give up and accept whatever happens.
Oh, yeah.
Challenges can be tough, but they can also be huge opportunities to learn and grow.
So it's not about asking why me when something bad happens.
Right. It's about asking, what can I learn from this?
I love that. It's like shifting your perspective from feeling like a victim to becoming an active participant in your own life story.
Exactly. You have the power to choose how you respond to challenges.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of agency and choice, but what about that feeling of being guided or supported by something bigger than ourselves? How does that fit in?
That's a great question. And I think it really depends on the individual. For some people, that sense of guidance might come from their religion.
Right.
For others, it might be more of a general feeling of connection to something bigger.
Like a universal energy or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's about finding what resonates with you personally.
Okay, so let's circle back to the source material for a second. They end with this really powerful statement about God's plan being bigger than your past mistakes, bigger than your current circumstances, and bigger than your wildest dreams. What do you make of that?
It's a beautiful sentiment, and I think it speaks to that deep human desire for something that transcends our everyday experiences.
But
I think we have to be careful not to interpret it too literally.
How so?
Well, if we take it to mean that God has this fixed blueprint for our lives and that everything is predetermined, then it could lead to a sense of complacency.
Or even despair. Like, what's the point of even trying if it's all already decided?
Exactly. But I think there's another way to look at it.
And listen.
What if instead of seeing God's plan as this rigid set of instructions, we see it as more of a collaborative process?
Like we're co-creating our destinies with a higher power.
Exactly. It's about trusting that we have a role to play in this grand scheme of things.
That our choices and actions actually matter.
Absolutely. And maybe our mistakes too.
Interesting. So it's not about being perfect.
No. It's about embracing the journey with all its ups and downs.
And trusting that even the detours can lead us to something amazing.
Exactly. The journey itself is part of the plan.
I love that. Okay, so to wrap up this deep dive, I think what we've really been exploring is the idea that even if you believe in a higher power and a divine plan, you still have the power to choose your own path.
And that those choices have real consequences.
They do! But we're not alone in this journey,
We can trust that there's something bigger guiding and supporting us.
even when we can't see the way forward.
Exactly. It's a beautiful mystery.
It is. Well, this has been an incredible conversation. Thanks for joining me today.
The pleasure was all mine.
And thank you to all of you listening out there. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. So feel free to reach out to us on social